So, in this part we will learn about wind. So, before I start explaining about wind and the types of wind, let's discuss the two important factors of wind. One is pressure gradient, another one is Coriolis force. So, the pressure gradient, the rate of change of pressure per unit distance is called pressure gradient, and the force applied by pressure gradient to drive the winds is known as pressure gradient force. This means that the greater difference in the pressure between two contiguous regions, the faster the speed of the wind. We always know, or if you see the diagram of pressure belt where I have mentioned the wind direction, that winds blows from high pressure belt to low pressure belt. The next is the Coriolis force. So, what is Coriolis force? Any object or moving object, it's slightly deflected to the right hand side in the northern hemisphere, and in the southern hemisphere it tends to deflect to the left hand side. So, due to the rotation of the earth, winds on the surface of the earth cannot flow at a straight course and get deflected. This we call it Coriolis effect or Coriolis force. It changes the direction of wind. At the equator there is no deflection. The amount of deflection increases towards the pole. Farrell's law explains that the effect of Coriolis force on the winds. Let's discuss about winds. So, what is wind? Wind is air in motion. It is the horizontal movement of air. Wind moving at a slow speed is called breeze. Wind speed is measured by anemometer, which is an instrument. Next, we will learn about types of wind. There are different types of wind like permanent wind or planetary wind, then seasonal wind, then periodic wind, local wind, variable winds, mountain winds. In this part, we will learn about these types of winds in detail. So, the first type of wind is permanent or planetary wind. So, these planetary or permanent wind or the prevailing winds are major winds blowing in the same direction between the pressure belts. They are deflected by the Coriolis force. So, they blow all over the planet always in the same direction. Now, these permanent winds are also three types. What are these? See the diagram: Tradewind, Westerlies and Easterlies. First, we will learn about Tradewinds. Now, Tradewinds blow from the subtropical high pressure belt in the north and southern hemisphere towards the equator, because in the equator there is a presence of low pressure, and in the subtropical areas where is a presence of high pressure. We already learned that wind always blows from high to low. So, these trade winds in the northern hemisphere get deflected and become northeast trade wind, as you see in the diagram, whereas the trades in the southern hemisphere are deflected to their left and blow as southeast trade. The trade blow constantly and steadily in the same direction. They derive their name from the Latin word called trado, which means blowing steadily in the constant direction. So, when the trade winds blow over the some tropical waters, they absorb large amount of moisture, and onshore on the eastern margins of the continents, bringing heavy rainfall within the tropical zone. So, the trade winds blow the tropical cyclone into the land from the tropical seas in an east-west direction. So, the next one is westerlies. So, the westerlies blow between the latitudes, that is 30 degree to 60 degree north and south of the equator. These winds blow in a direction opposite to the trades, are also known as anti-trades. They blow from the subtropical high pressure belt to the subpolar low pressure belt. As you can see in the diagram that due to the deflection, they become southwesterlies in the northern hemisphere and northwesterlies in the southern hemisphere. The westerlies are not so regular or steady like steady in the northern hemisphere, unlike trade winds, and however they are steadier and stronger in the southern hemisphere because they face minimal land interference. The sailors called them the brave west winds, or depending on the latitude, they are called roaring 40s, furious 50s, screaming 60s. The westerlies bring rain on the western margin of the continents in the temperate belt. This is the significance of westerlies. Another thing, that in the southern hemisphere between 40° to 60° north, the westerlies blow at a great force over the vast ocean, because in the southern hemisphere, as we learned earlier, there is a less presence of land, so wind speed is extremely high, and that is why they refer of these names that we already learned: roaring 40s, furious 50s, and streaming 60s. Let's talk about polar winds or polar easterlies. So these blow from the high pressure regions to the circumpolar low pressure belts. They are not rain bearing winds, that is polar easterlies. So the polar easterlies blow outwards from the high pressure regions towards the circumpolar low pressure belt, and in the northern hemisphere the polar easterlies blow from the northeast, and in the southern hemisphere it blows from the southeast. In winter over the northern hemisphere, the cold polar winds cover large parts of North America and Asia. The large masses of cold air meet the warm westerlies over the North Atlantic and North Pacific, forming fronts, and temperate cyclones generally form because of this wind.